You're listening to the Content Sells Podcast, the show all about how to create content to attract, convert, and keep your ideal clients. Welcome to episode 242. I'm Suzi Dafnis, and here with me is my co-host, Michelle Falzon. Hey, Michelle, how are you?
Hi, Suzi. I am doing really, really well, thank you. Looking forward to speaking with you today and also chatting to our special guest.
Yes, I do love it when we have a guest. And today's topic is one that is so universal for our listeners, a topic that is really personal to me, just such an important teacher and lesson. And I'm excited to dive in.
Yes, I am too. Very excited to dive in. And our guest today is Erin Weed. And I had the great pleasure of meeting Erin in the US last year. And we just kind of clicked. And also she was just so impressive with what she was sharing. And as our listeners will hear today when we speak to her, Erin is a person who helps leaders excavate and distill their truth so they can express themselves authentically. Now that sounds like something I want to learn more about. And she does this through her unique method called the dig. And she says, I created the dig to help you remember who you are, what you stand for, and how to share it with others. And having done this process with Erin, I can tell you it's really powerful and definitely delivers on her promise. And a couple of other quick things about Erin before we chat to her. She founded an organization called Girls Fight Back, and during 12 years of teaching over 1 million women at live events how to predict and prevent violence, Erin said she learned words can change the world. She's also a sought-after coach for people to nail their TEDx talks, and she's been doing that for a long time. She's an absolute master at it. And she has been featured in the New York Times, Washington Post, CNN. She's an absolute amazing craftsperson and expert at what she does. And by now, I guess you're getting the idea that she really is a bit of a genius at getting to the heart of your authentic core message. Today, we're going to be talking to Erin about how you can find your core message and purpose and how that can help you create more effective content marketing. Shall we get Erin on the line?
Let's do that.
Hi, Erin. Welcome to the Content Sells Podcast.
Oh, I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh, we're so excited. We're so excited to introduce you and your work to our listeners. Let's kick off by having you describe what the dig is and what inspires you to develop this process.
So the dig is a method that I developed in 2012, and it basically helps someone to unearth their purpose and distill the whole thing down to just one word. And the reason that I decided to do this, I didn't really decide. It just kind of organically very much happened because I was working with TEDx speakers at the time. And basically these people were just having a hard time distilling these big truths and tons of data and tons of ideas down to that 18 minutes or less. Mm-hmm. And I started to realize that we're always going to be more confident when we're clear. And so I was like, how do we get these speakers so ridiculously clear that they organically become more confident, and then they organically make the connection that they're looking to create with their audience? And so I was like, what if we just got down to one word? Like, hey, your talk is all about finance, but maybe it's really about freedom, you know? So you're talking about a subject matter, but through the lens of, I call it a frequency. Because you can feel the difference. Like, let's, to stick with the speaker examples, you can feel the difference if you see a finance speaker about freedom, who has like the frequency of freedom, versus someone who has the frequency of safety. You know what I mean? So even if you never say the word, the leader is bringing it through in how they deliver their content. You feel it. And so I started just getting them down to one word. At first, it was just kind of a game, just like how much can we distill this thing, And then people started really rocking their talks and going viral. And I was like, okay, I think we got something here. And I know I'm not the best speech coach in the world. Like, there's definitely better speech coaches who are great performers and script writers and things. But what I'm really good at is helping people express their most authentic selves.
That is so cool. I love that. And I imagine that feeling is a big part of how you differentiate your method from, other people who talk about messaging, clarifying purpose. What else? Is there more than that?
What else as far as what?
Let me ask that again, and we might just take that little bit out. So I imagine that feeling is definitely a part of what differentiates your method. How does the dig differentiate from other methods for creating messaging and clarifying purpose?
Yeah, there is definitely a feeling component to it. I feel like what we do in the dig, and the reason I call it the dig, is that we're excavating what's already there. We're helping people to remember their true self. I don't feel like I ever go into a session with a client and tell them who they are, but I am a really skilled Sherpa in holding their hand as we look at their whole backstory and seeing their own brilliance, even in their struggles, and bringing that into their message and infusing it into what you have to share with other people. Because I believe that our purpose is to be the best student in this one word frequency, but it's also to be the best teacher. And so that's probably why I've worked with a lot of speakers and authors, because that constant cycle of learning and sharing is it should never stop, right? If we're going to be evolving human beings.
I love what you said about excavating. That is such a great word, because what it reminded me of is a sculptor. And, you know, when they talk about there's a piece of marble and then you take away what is not David or what is not the piece. And that's kind of what you're doing with people around that core messaging. I love it.
Totally. I mean, if you think about it, I think most of us have experienced something in our life, whether it's through childhood or into present day, where we were confronted with some circumstances that made us, whether it be out of necessity or safety or belonging, where we just start to adapt ourselves to become something that we're not totally. And then that becomes a habit. And then that becomes a life, because we start making these choices in alignment with that thing that's not us, and it becomes this slippery slope. And so I feel like a lot of what the dig does is it helps people get back to the basics, like deep down inside, who are you really and what do you have to share? And people are usually relieved, you know, like that's, you know, sometimes people are like, oh, is it scary to do a dig? And I'm like, sometimes people have some hesitancy just because there's a lot of sharing involved with it when you're working with a dig facilitator. But, you know, it's almost like if you ran into your best friend at the airport. You know what I mean? You weren't expecting to see him there. It's just like, oh, I remember you. This is awesome, you know? And so it's almost like we're running into ourselves in a very strategic way, and that's only going to be a good thing.
Love it.
Yeah, I love the way you put that. And I too really resonate with the excavating idea. And I, you know, from the minute that I met you and you told me about this process, I was like, that name is genius, the dig, right? Because that's exactly what it is. Let's go for the dig. And as you're listening to Erin speaking, just as a meta thing, do you see how easy it is for her to integrate that name just into the language? Like when we do a dig or when you talk to a dig facilitator, like that name is just so portable and genius and absolutely so accurate to what you do. And I think to your point, we do bury ourselves, you know, it keeps us safe. Maybe we were rejected in some way at some level and we tuck those parts of ourselves away, but it's very often those parts that we need to be sharing if we want to teach, if we want to reach people, if we want to connect. So I just love your work, and I've done the dig, and I want to say to anybody that might be scared of the dig, do not be scared. It was awesome, and it's absolutely had an impact. Like it was over a year ago, I think, or close to a year ago, and I still think about that process, and it still guides me and my word. I love when I hear examples and stories of people that you've worked with or that, you know, that have had the experience. So can you share maybe a transformative experience or a breakthrough that occurred because of the dig, whether it's your own or something with a client, just to dimensionalize things a bit for our listeners?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think the best part of my job is just all of the rad human beings that I get to meet and see and witness in such a powerful, transparent way. And, you know, I've done about 1,500 digs at this point, and mostly in individual or small group kind of settings. So it's been a lot of digging. And there's just so many interesting people. Like, and I would say honestly that like every time I walk away from a dig, I have fallen in love a little bit with the person because there's something about it. There's some famous quote that's like, you know, if you don't like someone, just get to know them. You know, it's like if you really get to know someone, it's really hard to not like them anymore. And that's the beauty of my job. I mean, I work, I think one of the people that comes up for specific examples, I work with the NFL a lot. And I just love these guys. Like, they're so energetic and they're the best workers and they're just such good students because like they're athletes, so they're used to like just taking letting you take the lead and then they do what you ask them to do. And there's this one gentleman named Ryan Harris who it was a Denver Bronco. And he actually was a Super Bowl champion. So when they won, I think it was in 2015. And, this guy is so successful, just amazing real estate investor and, just businessman in a lot of different ways. But he really wanted to speak and he wanted to share his story. He wanted to get that message out there. And so it's not like he was lacking anything, like he has the prestige, he has the knowledge, he has the connections, and yet he still didn't have that total confidence because he didn't have the total clarity. So we were able in his dig to discover, and he gives me permission to talk publicly about him. So I'm not sharing anything I shouldn't, but in his dig, we found out that his word is beyond. Now, this guy has just an operating system that is like a rocket ship. You know what I mean? Like everything he does, whether it's with his marriage or with his companies or with his children or with his football commentator work, it's like he wants to go outside of the stratosphere. So that's infused in everything. And there's a superpower in that. And there's also a struggle in that. Like he suffers because of this sometimes too. He's a lot for people because a lot of people aren't built to be rocket ships, So, but we were able to take that one word and infuse it into his communications, into how he even talked about himself when he was selling his speaking services and ultimately when he put his book out.
So good.
I love that. It's this acceptance of self as well, like just realizing who you are and embracing that. And I know when I see a great speaker or a great communicator or a great teacher, I think that's the common thing with all of them. There's this degree of self-possession and of being prepared to sort of show up and be present. Yeah. So, Suzi, I know you kind of were also really interested in that, like knowing and
So there's someone I studied with almost 20 years ago, and one of their definitions of love was knowing. And the premise was that when we know something deeply, when we have knowledge about something, we have an affinity and a love for it. And that's kind of what you were saying is like the moment I start to see who that person really is, part of me falls in love with them. And yet so many of us don't allow ourselves to be known. But if we think about even the big movie stars or musicians, the ones that we get to see are the ones we typically fall in love with. And it's kind of a side comment, but I just connected with that when you said that about falling in love.
Yeah, I think authenticity has just incredible power. But I also feel like it's one of those words that has been really kind of twisted around into some weird marketing. It's almost like if people say they're authentic, they're probably not.
They're totally not.
Yeah, beware.
Or, I mean, my TEDx talk that I gave a few years ago was all about the difference between transparency and authenticity. Which is something I love to talk about because I think sometimes people get it mixed up. They think, oh, for me to show up as who I really am, I have to like tell the whole thing, right? I have to let all the skeletons out of the closet. I'm a sacred vault for some incredible human beings, and like none of their secrets and trials is necessary, unless they really deem it to be necessary to share with the world. But like, it's about the nectar that's within these life experiences and what we extract from it and how we evolve through it. And so I don't believe we have to be full on transparent all the time,
I agree.
and especially on social media, you'll see that there's a lot of people who don't understand this.
Yeah.
It can get a little awkward at times, so.
Yeah, I think that's a really powerful distinction you're making. And it's something that I imagine you have to be really clear on with people, because as you go on the dig and you do the excavation, it doesn't mean everything you find has to be, put on display. It just means you're sort of looking in that territory for the things that are kind of close to the bone, close to the center of the core of the person. So we've started talking a bit about people, like you mentioned, your client, and he's kind of got businesses and things like that. A lot of the listeners to this show are small business owners. So how can undergoing a process like the dig, whether it's the dig itself or whether it's they're getting really clear on their sort of core purpose, their core messaging, their core frequency, which I love that phrase. How does a process like the dig empower a small business owner to create more authentic and impactful content, right? This show's content sells. We want to talk about content. Like, why do we need to get clear on our core message and purpose? What benefit does that have for our communication?
Well, one of the being a small business owner myself, I mean, I think one of the things that's held me back and my peers back has been self-doubt. Like when we don't have, I actually use the term epic clarity, like not just, oh, I feel clear about what I do. I want epic clarity of who I am, what I stand for, and how to express it. So that anybody you run into at any networking event or coffee shop or airplane, you are so on fire and ready to tell this person about what you do and what you have to offer that you just become unstoppable. And so I think it's that epic clarity that a lot of small business owners are missing. And I'm sure there's a lot of different ways that you can find it. For me, I need, because I tend to have kind of an overwhelmed brain. I run a little anxious. So the hyper distillation of the one word helps to bring me back. And one of the things that we do in the dig is after we get people to their one word and they know what that frequency is that they're here to learn and teach, we do an exercise called the grounding question. Because it's one thing when you go and you have these personal development experiences and you feel all great and you walk out of there, it's awesome. But then life hits, right? Then you're challenged. Then you get into a fight with your partner. Then, it's just like life gets lifey. And so we have this tool that I call the grounding question. And so the grounding question is a very simple, straightforward question that we can ask ourselves, particularly when we're triggered and where we're less likely to be in our most authentic vibration. So we basically ask ourselves this question to bring us back to who we are, to bring us back into our unique native frequency. And so I'll give you an example of this. So my dig word is authentic. I am here to learn about this. I have massively screwed this up in my life. I have built an entire business around helping people do it. It's superpower in shadow. But on a daily basis, because that is my word, and I'm learning about this in this lifetime, I'm constantly challenged by it. And so I have a grounding question to make me constantly stop and be mindful that I need to choose and drop in with my authentic self instead of just reacting. So for me, my grounding question is, how real do you want to be? How real do you want to be? And these grounding questions are important because it's not like a yes or no answer. It's not black and white. It's not binary. It's an invitation to come back into yourself, and how real do you want to be? There's times where I like get in the back of an Uber and I don't want to be real. I am sleep deprived. Right. I am, whatever's just happened. I don't want to talk to a singular person. Or, I mean, if there's any speakers in your audience, like after you get off stage and you're just like completely, you don't want to make friends and it's okay. So how real do you want to be? Zero, but it's inviting me back into myself, so that I can operate from a place of power and confidence versus falling into an inauthentic reaction.
What a powerful tool you've just given us. We want people to go do the dig. I want to do the dig. And even in what you just said there about having a grounding question that gets you present, so powerful because your access to that presence is so much faster when you've nailed that grounding question. So good. Totally. What do you find is the most challenging aspect for people going through the dig? On a personal level, what do they find most challenging and how do you help them overcome it?
It's a pretty ease-filled process just because people are talking about this topic that they are most expert in, which is themselves. And so that's usually not super challenging. I do sometimes have people that feel some resistance around this idea of one word, almost as if the one word is somehow limiting you or boxing you somehow. I am an Enneagram 7, so I do not like to be trapped or restricted in any way, shape, or form. I get that argument. I actually feel like the word is where all the freedom is, because the word allows you to have this complete expansive experience on life, but to look at it through a lens. Because if we were just to look at every situation that happens to us through the lens of, freedom and nurturing and beingness and love and authenticity, and I mean, it's just like, you can't do it. You just can't do it. But if you look at it through one frequency, it all of a sudden just becomes more rich.
I have a question about that. Firstly, you obviously create a very safe environment, because being more authentic isn't something that everybody feels safe going into. So obviously you create a really amazing environment. Oh my gosh, what was the question? Let me come back to that. The one word. So what if you've got freedom and I've got freedom? Is that where people might feel limited? It's like, well, or how is my lens different?
You mean if like two people have the same dig word?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that happens sometimes. And but here's the cool thing. When I bring those people up in my mind's eye, they are not even remotely similar. You know what I mean? And freedom is actually a good one example to use, because I do have several people that have the word freedom. And when I think of them, though, I mean, they're so different, because in addition to getting you down to one word, I think I've mentioned the term operating system a few times. So your operating system is extracted from you telling your life story. It's 10 words or less. It's in a shape. And it's just these one word frequencies that are working together. If you can think of it almost like a sports team, you need the whole team to play the game, but the dig word is the captain. So you have these 10 words that are working all the time. So that's another reason that everybody's completely different. Even if you do have the same captain, you definitely don't have the same operating system, which is really fun.
Yeah, because the DNA has all these different components. I love it. Now, as Michelle said, our audience are women business owners, and they know that in a crowded market, standing out is so essential. So how do you recommend business owners find their unique voice and messaging, and what do they do with it once they've found it?
Oh, yeah. I feel like voice and messaging is so ridiculously important for small business owners. I mean, first of all, I just believe that everybody is here to tell their story and to share something, and that all of us can leave an audience better than we found them with the right intention. And that should really be our only calling in it, is not to fix people or save people or cure people, but simply to share so that they can grab whatever nugget out of your story and your truth that's going to make them a better human being, or to provide more ease on their path. I feel like entrepreneurs too are just some of the best teachers in the whole wide world, and this is coming from someone. I work with academia a lot, and I know those are the educators of the world, and they're amazing, but there's something about the spirit of a business owner that just almost automatically turns you into a teacher. So the more clear you can get on what your message is, the more you can help people.
I love what you're saying, because we say this inside of Her Business all the time, that we are all teachers. We're teaching someone what to want. We're teaching someone why their nutrition is important. We're teaching someone how to navigate menopause. We're teaching someone the right blinds to put in their living room. We are teachers. And so that messaging is so important. And once we have it at this nub, like you're providing us with, it can go everywhere. Like Michelle said, this show is about content marketing, but that message, that's your differentiator. That is so powerful. Thank you so much for what you just said.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
You're such a goodie, Erin. We love you already. Hey,
I love you guys.
Yeah.
I could talk about this forever, as you can
I know.
see.
We could be here all day. We could be in
Yeah.
trouble here in a 4-hour podcast episode. But just one last question from me. Can you talk about how the dig, or perhaps other strategies that you might be able to recommend, can really help someone who might be having that fear of visibility and putting themselves out there in their marketing, in their speaking, in their content, that they might be sharing? Like, I think that's sometimes we just cannot cross that threshold. What do you say to that person?
Well, the dig facilitator in me gets super curious about why they're not putting themselves out there. Like, it's probably in your operating system. I have a client who had that similar issue. And, but she's an executive at a company, and they really wanted her to start talking more and things like that. She just couldn't get there. We dug her. Her dig word is peace.
We dug her. I love it. I love it.
I'm telling you, this name, it just keeps bearing fruit. We'll keep listening to her speak. It's so
fabulous.
good.
I have a very fluffy dog who's in the other room, and I just saw this picture of like you and your facilitators. Like you can only hear me now. You can't see me, listeners, but I'm like doing the digging action.
Yeah. So her dig word is peace, right?
Yeah, right.
And so what was going on there was that she felt like by putting herself out there, she was opening herself up so much that it was going to mess with her peace. And so what we had to do is not change her. Like I don't like when self-help changes people. Like people are amazing. Let's just get back to the version that's the most true, because that's going to be the natural one to shine. So I was like, let's not change the fact that you have avoided these opportunities to speak out because you don't want to get stressed out. Let's honor you, but let's also shift the story. What if you sharing your vast amount of knowledge and expertise actually brought about more peace? What if by what you say, you share it with your audience and you give them peace? Like, what if that's your offering? And so she started to see her message as a peace offering.
No, what a great reframe.
So good.
That's so good.
And then all of a sudden it felt good for her.
Yeah.
Because it's on purpose.
Yeah.
And so this is why, I mean, I know we talk a lot in the business world about you got to find your why and your purpose and all this stuff. And I think people even get annoyed at it sometimes because it's just, you hear it all the time. It's like, but that's why. Like if you are not connected to your purpose, it doesn't click with you, it doesn't make sense to you, it doesn't resonate, or it's too long, you are going to block yourself from bringing your most amazing, awesome version of yourself forward. Period.
Speak it.
Sing it, sister. Yeah. I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
I love that so much because I feel like the purpose of our work is to give women more visibility, but I do see them sort of shrinking back. I want to have a successful business, but don't make me dance on TikTok. It's like, you don't have to dance on TikTok, and that's that fight. It's like, I want this, but peace is so important to me, or my privacy, or I'm an introvert, and finding that way that the thing becomes your reason for that you
awesome. You bring up a great example there too of like that's an example of when we can really sink into our authentic expression. Okay, so I don't want to dance on TikTok, but what does feel really good for you? What's something so unique and interesting and cool? And one of the ways that we find that is through ease. What is the most ease-filled way for you to get what's in here out there? Go with that. Are you a speaker who writes? Like I work a lot with people who are thought leaders. So we talk about, are you a speaker who writes or are you a writer who speaks? And what that basically means is that whichever one comes first is where it originates. So a speaker who writes would be somebody who is going to most effortlessly and authentically create their content by going on a walk and talking into their phone. They need to speak it out. And then it gets turned into the written word later if that's necessary. I personally happen to be the flip of that. I'm actually a writer first. And most people, because I'm so affiliated with the TED world, think I'm just more of a speaker, but I'm really not. I need to write something out first before I want to like really put it into the written or the spoken word. So it doesn't matter. I mean, maybe you're an artist and you need to draw it out before you can express it. So what a fun challenge for all of us to think about. First of all, be grateful that we have these incredible channels like social media networks to be able to share our authentic self, but then just to get curious about what sounds like fun. Because whatever sounds like fun and ease to you is going to be your most authentic way of expressing.
I love it. I love it, love it, love it so much. Now, you have a gift for our listeners. I'm so excited for you to tell us a little about the free training that you're offering our Content Sales listeners.
Yes, I'm really excited to give this to you all. So there is a fun little tool that I teach in my keynotes, and it's called Head, Heart, Core. And basically, this is a tool that helps you access your full truth about any subject matter and it helps you access your full truth in a very short amount of time so you can express it to someone else. And so I call it head, heart, core because we have 3 truths that are running at all times. We have a factual truth, what's just true, like my age and where I live and if I have kids, blah, blah, blah. That's factual truth. Then you have emotional truth. That's just what you're feeling. And no one can dispute that. It's your truth. And then you have core-based truth. That's in your gut here. And that's what you want. So when you put together what you think with what you feel with what you want, you will have the answers to who you really are and what you're trying to strive for in this life. And a lot of people just don't know that. Like if you ask them the question, if you have any executive coaches in your audience, like, you know, you start off the question, but what is it you really want? People are like, I have no idea.
The walls
But
go,
if you teach them head, heart, core, like, okay, what's the factual, you know, reality of this? Or another situation could be like, you know, where you want to live. I work with a lot of people who are at that kind of empty nester age. And so a lot of transition. Well, where do you want to live? Okay. You know, like what are the factual realities? What's the emotional reality? What do you want? You know? And it just doesn't have to take a long time to get to your whole truth. And it doesn't have to be hard. I would really love, as a byproduct of my work, that people start to associate ease and authenticity.
Love it. And so I'm going to give everyone the URL right now, but we'll also put it in our show notes. So you'll find this free training, and I believe it's a video and a worksheet. Is that right, Erin?
That's correct. Yeah.
Yep. At Erin Weed, WEED.com/free training. So erinweed.com/free training. And once again, we'll give that to you again before we go today so that you have it. Erin, it's been fantastic. Is there anything you'd like to leave us with?
You know, the last thing I just want to leave you all with, because I know when we have these kinds of conversations around authenticity, it can be one of those things where we're just like, oh yeah, that'll be nice for someday. But wouldn't it be nice if we lived in a world where everybody was a bit more authentic? And I just would love to issue a challenge to our listeners here today that someone's got to go first. You know, if we want a more authentic world, if we want people to be real with us, we got to be real with them first. And so maybe just as a little takeaway from today's episode, you can just go one step further than you might normally go in expressing your factual, emotional, or core-based truth, and just be real with people, because guess what? We're all mirrors for each other. So whatever you put out there, you're going to get back.
Such sage advice. Thank you so much. Thank you again, Erin. We so appreciated your time and just sharing your brilliance. I knew it was going to be great, and it was even better than I thought. Thank you so much.
Thank
you.
So good to see you guys. Take care.
Oh, Michelle, thank you for introducing Erin into my world. I think she's going to be part of my world for a while.
Yeah,
I just
absolutely.
resonated with this message. And you mentioned you'd done the dig. So do you want to share your word?
Yeah, well, look, I'm not sure any other person that she's done the dig with has had this word. I recall speaking to her about it a few months later, and nobody had, and I haven't checked in with her since. But nobody will ever guess it. I could run a little guessing competition, but like there'd never be a winner. It was such an obscure word, you know, and when it came to me, it was undeniably the word. Then the process is fantastic. And I was like, surely that's not the word. And I'm like, but it just so feels like the word. My word, Suzi, is twine.
Oh, like as in intertwined and twine, like.
Yeah, like if
it doesn't matter. You don't have to explain, but that's so
but if you
interesting.
think about twine, like a twine, like a thread that's twined is like woven around itself, and it's stronger, and it's like bringing multiple ideas together to make a new, stronger thing. It's about bringing people together. It's about connection and strength. Like suddenly, when I really open myself to it, I'm getting goosey talking to you about it now. I really,
thank
really
you for sharing it.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, I didn't even think maybe you didn't want to share it. But
yeah, my word was but. Yeah, no, it's beautiful. It opened a dimension of myself that I wasn't as tuned into, like that I could really own, and you know, some of the things she talked about today really
so good.
Authentic around.
Thank you. Well, I took so much away. I'd love to hear what you're taking away. I've got a couple of things I jotted down, and if you're listening, we want to know what you are taking away too, but I'll come back to that in a minute.
Yeah, look, I saw you start writing down, and I immediately wrote down when she said that we're more confident when we're clear. And I was like, oh, that just spoke right into my being. And I know that's so true. I know when I'm feeling reluctant and hesitant, sometimes I beat myself up and I realize, oh, hang on, I just need to get more clear. I just don't actually have the clarity, the information, or the vision, or the direction, or the sense of what's next. But when we have it, I mean, I know myself, that's when I feel more confident. But she added that overlay of, it's not just clarity, it's epic clarity, so that you're so on fire, you're ready to tell people about what you do, and you're so ready, you become unstoppable. It's like, it transcends confidence, doesn't it? That being unstoppable.
Oh, I love it. And I love the use of the word epic, which is not a word I love in this context. I absolutely love it, because the power of clarity, you know, there's a saying that clarity leads to power. I think epic clarity, oh my gosh, what is that going to lead to? It's incredible. So I absolutely love that. I also loved where she talked about ease, and she talked about, are you a writer who speaks or a speaker who writes? And she used herself as an example. But really finding, I mean, this show is about creating content, you know, expressing your authentic self to your customers, getting people to know you. And so finding the ease is so important. And that's where I really want to encourage our listeners, as we do on the show, to find what's right for you. Don't worry what the competitors are doing. Don't worry what the person with 10,000 million people following them is doing. Find the path that is right for you, where you can express yourself in a way that you feel right at home doing it. So I loved that.
Yeah, and one that I wanted to sort of call out for our listeners as well. And obviously, you know, it's I loved hearing it again as well, but I loved when Erin was talking about that example of a person that spoke about finance. But the dig, when she did the dig, she realized that their actual frequency was freedom. And being able to, you don't have to say freedom, 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 but just letting that be the frequency of how you speak about finance, and how that message about finance is going to be calibrated and different to the person who's got the frequency of, say, safety, you know? So somebody that's talking about safety might be all about like paying off your mortgage, and even just the phrases and the language, the way they name their products, and all of those things will be different than the person who's focused on freedom. They might have a higher risk profile. They might focus more on the things that the money's going to get for you when you invest it. And, you know, it's just, I loved the way she gave us a clue to expand our topic, to bring ourselves into our topic. So even if you are somebody who talks about finance or solar or flowers or interior decoration, you can still bring your frequency to it. And in fact, I think you must, if you really want to stand out and you really want to have fun with it and feel so on purpose and aligned.
That ties in very much with something I wrote down, which is, and you mentioned it right at the top of the show. She says, remember who you are, what you stand for, and how to share it with others. That's what the dig is about. And there is such a confidence when we can get to that point where we know who we are, when we know what we stand for, where we're willing to be a stand for someone else, and that we have a very clear, back to that word clarity, way to share it. That makes visibility so much easier. There's no push. It's just more natural. So I'm very excited to explore this further. Is there anything else, Michelle, before we wrap up?
Just that she not only gives you the word and the process and all those things, but she then gives you the process to keep coming back to it. I loved what she talked about, the grounding question, and also the one word, like when things are really busy and overwhelming, it's hard to remember that 50-word, you know, mission statement, but the one word is always with you. And then the same with the grounding question. When we do get triggered, because it's going to happen, how do we bring ourselves back to ourselves, back to our native frequency? That's what she called it, our unique native frequency. And that's just sparked for me just a remembrance of just spending more time in that place, in my own unique native frequency, and creating my content from there, making my business decisions from there, you know, all of those things.
Thank you, Michelle. And thank you once again to Erin. We're going to give you a link to her website, all the places you can find her, as well as access to the free program that she's making available. You're going to find all that over at herbusiness.com. The Dig, herbusiness.com, The Dig. Or you can go to erinweed.com/free training, which we mentioned a little earlier. Michelle, what do we have coming up in the next episode?
We're talking about how you can become famous. So the next episode is all about how to use your content to become famous. And it's going to be a great follow-on from today because, maybe you'll be able to inject some of the things you've learned from Erin into your content as you magnify, get more seen, and get famous, whatever that might mean for you.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Erin. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next time right here on the Content Skills Podcast. Bye for now.